What's up, Bulldogs? All right, today I have a guest on the channel, and his name is Brandon Blais, and he's actually a fellow Bulldog. And I thought it'd be kind of cool to share with you guys his story because he's had a lot of success adopting the Bulldog mindset and just doing a lot of really cool things in his life. Brandon, I've been kind of going back and forth with Brandon over the years, and have stayed in touch with him, and it's just kind of cool to see like the progress that he's made, adopting some of these mindset, and just wanted to give you guys a story that will kind of encourage you on your way, because I know a lot of you are, some of you are starting out on the path, and some of you have made some decent progress, but I want to show you kind of what is possible here. So welcome, and thanks for coming on, Brandon.
Hey, how's it going, John? Hey, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. And, honestly, before we get into it too much, I just wanted to say thank you. As you mentioned before, I know going way back, shoot, I don't remember, 7-8 years ago, you helped me out a lot. I was looking for some business advice. I think this was even before your YouTube channel, before you even got into the Pulsate stuff. And I remember you're like, hey, let's get together, let's talk. And you were super busy, and you made time for me, and I really appreciate it. I think we had scheduled like a half-hour Skype call, and I don't remember exactly how long we went. I feel like we went an hour and a half, and I could tell you were really listening, and you gave me some really solid advice. And that was before nobody was watching. This was just wasn't on YouTube, wasn't any of that. It was just you wanted to help me out, and I really appreciate that. So thank you. I appreciate that.
Oh, you're welcome. Cool. And I'm glad it's cool to see that you've taken the advice and have just the progress that you've made. So I thought maybe we could talk about that some today, just like kind of what maybe you can give your story, and where you've been, where you're going, and kind of some of the things that you've adopted, the lessons that you've learned along the way that are kind of part of this Bulldog mindset.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, I mean, it's been awesome, since we had that call, 7-8 years ago, just to see how you've progressed, and with your channel and your blog and all the things you're doing. Fitness has been awesome to see that. Some of the things for myself, one of the big things along the fitness lines is I lost 50 pounds.
Wow.
Now, in full disclosure, that was kind of in a couple of different iterations.
Yeah.
And I'm definitely not saying I'm at my goal or anything like that. Still looking to lean out a little bit more and build some muscle, but it was definitely a good start. And I watch your videos, your fitness videos, some of the supplements and things you recommend, the OMAD, talking about that. I've adopted some of that. That's been really helpful. But honestly, I just think it's really cool, like looking at even like your before and after pictures, and like I can kind of relate, because I'm like, yeah, I was out of shape, I was, you kind of like dig into that hole, and you kind of let yourself go, and you're like, oh man, how do I get out? But some of the things you're preaching on this channel have definitely helped me out with the fitness stuff. So that's been big. And then just on some of the kind of the life side, I've had 3 kids since we last talked, Mason and Grant and Preston. And that's been awesome. 3 young kids. Preston's the oldest. He's 4 years old. But honestly, since having kids, your channel even resonates more with me. And I was thinking about that a little bit. I'm like, why is that? And I think it's because a lot of what you talk about, it's geared towards young men,
Right. Yeah.
and kind of advice to help young men grow and develop. And I just think that that's super important, as especially as a father, having boys and realizing, I'm going to be an example to these guys, and I'm going to want to be able to share some wisdom with them and kind of help them navigate as they get a little bit older. And honestly, I think, I don't know what it is. I feel like young men are kind of, I almost want to say under attack, or maybe manhood itself is kind of under attack.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and so that's why, having a voice like yours, and being a part of that community is important to me, because I feel like it's something valuable and it's worth defending. And I've got some young kids, and I want to be able to see them grow into successful young men. So I was kind of thinking about that a little bit as I was, trying to prepare, like, oh man, what am I going to talk about with John, in terms of some of the successes and some of the life stuff, I think that goes hand in hand with the principles, you're preaching on this channel. Couple of cool things. So since we talked, I've been involved with several startups.
Nice.
And I think I've been kind of like yourself, bitten by that entrepreneurial bug.
Good. Yeah.
It's like once you get, at least for me, once you get a taste of it, like I was kind of weary, jumping into the water at first.
Yeah.
Once you get a taste of it, though, it's like, oh man, this is awesome. And it's kind of like what you said. I remember when you did your interview with Dan Locke, and you were just talking about the difference between kind of making money working for somebody else, and it's just like a job,
right?
Versus like you make money on your own. As part of a startup, or as part of being an entrepreneur, and it's like completely different. Even though it could be the same amount of money, it's just like a totally different feeling.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah. Definitely.
Yep. So the first startup I was a part of, the name of it was Accountable Care Associates. Really, really interesting company in Springfield, Massachusetts. They were in healthcare IT. It's pretty cool. Healthcare has been politicized, and I won't go too deep into that. There's all sorts of opinions on the politics of healthcare, but I think the mission is noble. Of how can we provide, using technology, provide better healthcare to more people,
right?
And maybe even like lower the cost. So I was a part of that. We thought we were going to be like the Google of healthcare. We thought that that business was just going to take off, and we were all going to be like millionaires one day. Unfortunately, it went belly up. But I wouldn't trade that experience for the world.
Oh, sure, yeah. No, you learn, right?
So yeah, I mean, being a part of a failed startup, you learn so much. And this ties into one of the principles I know you've heard or you've mentioned on this channel, which is, it's not so much what you do, it's more about who you become.
Exactly.
So,
exactly.
I mean, the results are great. Like, don't get me wrong. If I made $1 million on that startup, like that would have been awesome. I would have been, that would have been great. But I just learned so much, and that actually opened the door to a couple of other startups kind of down the road. So after that went belly up, I did kind of get a kind of regular kind of corporate job for a little bit, for about a month or so. I also did some work on some hobby project. I didn't honestly go too far. That was actually the one that you had helped me with. That was that content management system.
Okay, yeah.
So it was kind of a cool concept. Unfortunately, it didn't go too far. That was sitemailcms.com. I worked on that with my guitar teacher. But what that taught me, and again, I know you mentioned before on this channel, is just have that hobby project. Yeah. I learned a ton of stuff. I went through the initial system. I learned a lot about MVC and entity framework, and client-side frameworks, and just getting into AWS and getting into the cloud. So that was super cool. Then I rewrote it using .NET Core. So that was really neat. So even though that project itself didn't like take off, just having that experience, that like hands-on experience with the tech, was super valuable, and I carried that forward with me. So that's something I know you're always encouraging guys to do, is just like have those projects.
Yeah, you should always have some kind of side project, right? Otherwise, because then you're developing your skills, and you never know, like one of those things could really take off. I mean, heck, the entire thing, why I got started with entrepreneurship, like Simple Programmer, the blog was my side project, and then it became, my business. after that. But yeah, I didn't anticipate that it would become so big. So
Yeah, I was actually going to ask you what your favorite like hobby project was, or your favorite kind of side thing. Would you say it was Simple Programmer, or?
yeah, I think so. I'm trying to think if there was something else that, I mean, I did like, the Android and iPhone app, which was fun, but yeah, but Simple Programmer was always, because it was the most exciting thing, just like seeing that grow, and then and just getting it to the point where it is. And yeah, so that was definitely the most fun. Yeah.
Awesome. I still remember you had that series on there. Was it BAT? Like about some of the basic, I still go back to that sometimes. I really enjoyed that. But yeah, so currently where I'm at, my day job is I'm the senior director of development for Pulsate. So that is healthcare analytics. So kind of harkening back to that first startup, and we've actually got a few people from that first startup as a part of Pulsate. Man, I'll tell you, talk about Bulldog mindset. I've never worked at a place with so many Bulldogs.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And the company's kind of, honestly, when I got there, it was about 20 or so people. We're well over 100 now. We're growing like crazy. I've had some pretty good financial success there. I got in early enough where I was able to, get some stock options and things like that. And after the first startup failed, I was like, oh man, I'm not really sure if I want to kind of get back into that. I'm so glad I did, man. It's really, first of all, again, it's in healthcare. We're doing really cool stuff with machine learning and analytics, predictive analytics. So really, really cool stuff, helping people out. But it's also just, it's like the accountability and the transparency at Pulsate. It's like mind blowing. And every single person, they put such a big focus on the culture at Pulsate. Like every single person there has that mindset, which is awesome. And the accountability and the transparency, it goes two ways. So, I've been in part of places before where they preach transparency and accountability, but it's kind of like when your butt is on the line, they hold you accountable. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
But, it doesn't necessarily go the other way, when, higher ups are having meetings talking about finances or corporate strategy, those are like in smoke filled back rooms, and, you don't hear much about it. At Pulsate, every week we have a strategy meeting where our VP of finance, everybody's on the call, and they go through, like, in plain English, like, hey, here, here's where we're at in terms of revenue. This is the budget for the quarter, or this is the budget for the quarter. And like, we need to close X, Y, and Z in order to hit that. Or, good news, we're way ahead. But if you do A, B, and C, I can always like directly tie it to what I'm working on. So just that accountability and transparency is refreshing. So that's been really cool. And then I think, what I'd reached out to you this last time when we connected via email, helping to launch eventsathome.co. And I think you kind of had an interesting way of describing it, which I think makes sense. It's almost like an Airbnb for events, which is really cool. So the idea is we're basically connecting homeowners, so people who have, nicer properties, maybe they've got a second property, maybe they've got a barn on their property. We're connecting them with people looking for unique and very affordable venues for weddings, for corporate events, for parties, for all sorts of things. So you're not getting like the cookie cutter venues that a lot of people have. And it's also giving homeowners a chance to make some extra money. And honestly, if you don't even want to open up your home, but you've just got a nice piece of property, if you don't want to open it up for overnight visits and stuff like that, like, you don't have to do that. You can rent your backyard for the day. You're gone for the day and you're making money, and, somebody else has a really unique venue. So that's like just getting off the ground. But again, working with, some of the connections from that first startup has been really cool.
Yeah, I really like that idea. It's a really, really good idea, I think. I mean, especially in this sharing economy, because I can think of like, I mean, it's to me, it's somewhat more appealing than Airbnb being your space if you've got the right space for it, right? Because it's like, it doesn't inconvenience you. You don't have to have a stranger staying in your home, right? If it's a corporate or a wedding or something like that, that's kind of cool. And you could probably demand a pretty high price for something like that. So yeah, that seems like a really cool idea. I can think of a lot of ways that you could use that, and like even for like conferences, like I like yeah, a lot of this. I think you could disrupt this industry where a lot of the hotels, right, are they're basically for conventions and conferences and corporate events, right? It almost seems like, well, if you've got like a beach house, you can that would be pretty awesome, is to be able to have make a lot of money from that, and that'd also be awesome, I think, from to have your event at a location like that, where we're just kind of, yeah. So I like it. I think it's got a huge amount of potential. The big thing with that, I would say, though, is like you've got to get the network effect, right? Because you have to have, with that kind of a startup, you have to have both enough listings and enough people looking at the listings in order to make that work. I see that you're starting in like one state, which makes sense to me. That would, this way you can get enough traction, because if you have it all over the place, then it's going to be very hard to connect the buyers or the sellers. So
Right. Yeah, John, you are right on. And that's kind of one of the things I'm learning and have learned from past startups, is that and I think you've mentioned this before on your channel, that the technology is cool, but it's not always, and lots of times it's not the biggest piece of the puzzle. A lot of times the biggest piece of the puzzle is, you kind of have to have that sort of baseline of technology where it's usable. It looks pretty decent, like it's not going to crash when people go in there and try to list their home or do whatever, right? But the bigger piece, like if nobody knows about it, like if you can't market it, if you can't get that network effect, like you're not going anywhere.
exactly, yeah.
So, you could have the best tech in the world. We could be putting rovers on Mars, but if nobody knows about it, we're not going to make a penny, So, but yeah, luckily our CEO is Sarah Parlos, and she's in the event planning industry. So she's got a lot of connections. She actually kind of pulled the team together because she was just seeing through her event planning business. Hey, I've got people coming to me that are looking for unique venues, and are, they're kind of tired of the cookie cutter venues, and I also, she lives in Suffield, a really nice part of Connecticut. And she's like, and I know I've got neighbors who have really nice property that would probably be open to opening it up and just making a few extra bucks, right? Like maybe you can help pay your property taxes. Maybe you can, for like you said, a very unintrusive way to make some extra cash. So that's the hope anyways.
Yeah, no, I like it. I think it's a good idea, but yeah, like you said, it's really, you've got to get it going, got to get the, it's not just the technology or the idea, but yeah, hopefully you'll be able to get some traction on it. So
Yeah. So in terms of the principles, I had come up with a top 5 list. I thought maybe I could just go through and just let you know just real quick. I know we hit on some of these, but some of the things that you've said over time that have really made an impact, and how I've been able to kind of connect that. There's the business side and the fitness side, but just like personally, because a lot of your channel seems to be about growth and development, especially for young men.
yeah, let's talk about that for sure.
Does that make sense? Okay, cool. First one, and I kind of learned this early on, just be careful who you associate with. And I know you've mentioned this several times on your channel, and I've heard Jim Rohn talk about this as well. I think you've mentioned this same quote, that you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with.
Yeah.
It's like you have one kind of bad relationship, whether it's a girlfriend or a friendship or business partner, whatever it is, that can have a huge negative impact. I mean, huge. But likewise, if you have those positive relationships, that can help bring you up. And what I'm trying to do now is, I don't want to be the smartest guy in the room, right?
Right.
And I'm not saying that's a high bar to set, but I'm looking for opportunities to grow. I'm looking to connect with people like yourself, like others, right? Where I'm like, wow, this person's been successful. Let me pick their brain. Let me learn from them and see kind of what it is they're doing, because I'm trying to get to that next level, So that was one big thing. Another big thing that you talk about a lot is just, and I'll phrase it a little bit differently than I think you've worded it on your channel, but just taking pride in your name, and taking pride in yourself and your work. That's something that's been a huge motivator for me. When I'm working on something, whether it's a piece of code or whatever it is I'm doing, I'm always thinking, my name is on this. Like, if I put this out there to the world, or put this out there to John, or put this out there to whoever, they're going to come back and say, Brandon did this. And I want that to be a positive thing. And there's a really good quote, not to turn this into a Bible study or anything, but there's a really good quote in Proverbs that I like, that says, do you see a man skilled in his work? He will stand before kings. And I always kind of have that in the back of my mind, because that's kind of my goal, is to get skilled at my craft. And I just think about you and all the stuff you've been able to accomplish with, like, even your Pluralsight stuff, right? And just like the amount of courses you were able to crank out. And I know you've got that series about like how to learn anything. I forget what it is in like a certain amount of time.
Right. Yeah. The 10 steps to learn anything quickly. Yep.
Yeah. And I'm like, that's it. Like, work at your, have pride in your name, but also work at your craft, have those side projects, develop your skills, hone those skills. The other thing that stood out to me is your word is your bond. And I know you talked a little bit about, I saw this on your review of Donald Trump's The Art of the Deal.
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember telling that story about that guy who, he like made a deal with Donald Trump, and I guess it was, I don't know the details, it was like a bum deal. Do you remember that?
Yep.
And then his lawyer or somebody was talking to him, was like, dude, you should pull out of this thing. Like, this is total BS. And the guy's like, I don't want to hear that. Like, I shook hands with this guy. My word is my bond. Like, we're doing this.
Right. Yep.
And I think about that. I mean, that's definitely had a huge impact on me. If I say I'm going to do something, I'm doing it, and that's it. And it doesn't matter what the downside is, or if I'm going to lose something. Like, if I've committed to it, we're going to get it done, And again, I think of that story specifically that you told from that book. Another thing real quick was just not being a hypocrite. I wanted to ask you a question on this. So let me just tell this story real quick, and then ask you something about this. So in high school, typical teenage boy, for whatever reason, don't know why, got into smoking cigarettes. Stupid. I don't know why. Me and my buddies thought we were cool, right? And the thing is, every once in a while, my parents would catch me. And it really bothered my mom. Like, I could tell she was really, really upset about it. And she used to, I'd be out working, or, be at school. And sometimes she'd go through my room, she'd find my cigarettes, and she'd throw them out. And you can imagine I wasn't thrilled with that. So I remember one day, though, I got home from school, and she was just so frustrated and so upset. She just couldn't deal with it. Like, I just stunk like cigarettes. And she found some in my room, and she was like literally almost on the verge of tears. I felt like I was like this big, like making my mom cry, like, way to go, And she's like, Brandon, she's like, I can't deal with it anymore. I'm going to let your father deal with it. I'm like, oh, shoot,
Yeah.
So you never know what dad's going to do,
Yeah.
And, my dad had like a real man's job, like he wasn't sitting there on a computer. I mean, not that that's not a man's job, but, like he had a physical job. He's a big guy. He's got the big booming voice. And so I was like, all right, well, here we go. Right. So she gives my dad the cigarettes. And then I go, I think it was in the living room, go to talk to my dad. And, honestly, I expected him to ground me and yell at me and throw out the cigarettes and do whatever, right? And my mom leaves the room, and he says, Brandon, and he hands the cigarette back to me. He says, as much as I want you to quit smoking, I don't feel that it's right for me to tell you, hey, don't smoke when I smoke myself. He's like, so I'm not going to do that. He's like, but what I'll ask is just out of respect for me and your mom, don't do it in front of us, especially don't do it in front of your mother.
Mm-hmm.
And he gave them back to me, and he's like, and hey, by the way, I fully expect that when I quit, you're going to be there with me, helping me, right? Is that a deal? Is that fair? Fair enough. I'm like, yeah, Dad, and that kind of blew me away just because that wasn't the response I was expecting. That's not the response, you might expect a dad to give his son.
Right.
But the as much as he hated me smoking, he hated being a hypocrite more.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't know if it was just, that generation. I don't know if it's just my dad. He was also, in the military. And I went back, I was watching some of your videos last night. Your dad was in the military too, right? When you were younger?
Yeah. He was Air Force. Yeah.
He was the Air Force. So, I don't know. Was your dad kind of like the same way, kind of like a heavy, not a heavy hand, but kind of strict, kind of firm, or?
Yeah. I would say so for sure. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
but yeah, no, that's an interesting. Yeah, I like that approach to it, and I think it's important too. I mean, it's like you have to realize, I think, in life too, that you just can't force people to do anything, right? They always have to do it out of their own choice, right? That's a big principle from Dale Carnegie's book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. Also said that you can't make anyone do anything that they don't want to do, and it's I think that it makes sense a lot of times to if you give someone. Right. I think a lot of times what we tend to do is we lecture someone or tell them what they shouldn't do. Instead, it's a lot of times it's just more effective just to point out something, right? Just to say, hey, I noticed this, right? And not to not attach a judgment to it, and then let them make the judgment, let them do the thing that they're going to do. And yeah, because ultimately you can't control it. Like, a lot of situations, like if you think about it, even from your dad's perspective, even if he tried to force you to quit smoking or to not smoke, how could he really do that, right? There's not much that he could do. It's a decision that you're going to have to make on your own. And so to give someone that freedom I think is important. So it's hard to do, though. It's very hard to do.
Yeah, but John, you hit the nail right on the head, man. It is hard to do. Like when you really, really care about somebody or something, it's a tough thing to just realize and recognize the truth, which is exactly what you just said. You don't have as much control as maybe you'd like. You can't force people to do stuff. I mean, shoot, I've got little kids. I can't even force my 4-year-old to do stuff. Never mind, a teenager or a grown man or a business partner or your wife or girlfriend. So.
There's another Dale Carnegie one. This one I always remember is a man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still. And I think that's a good one to think about, because sometimes you can win the arm wrestling, but you haven't really, it's hearts and minds. Like you may have won logically, but you haven't won the heart. If you haven't won the heart, you haven't won. So,
John, let me ask you something while we're on that. So, in terms of management, right? Because my management style tends to be, I want to hire really smart people and kind of just let them do their thing. And, I can maybe help if they're blocked with something. I can maybe help set priorities, that sort of thing. But I've always kind of felt that, like, if you truly do have the best idea, along those same lines, you ought to be able to convince the team, right? You shouldn't have to mandate stuff. You should be able to say hey guys, let's get together, whiteboard this thing out, best idea wins, and let's go forward with it, right? And in theory, in a management position, that to me sounds awesome. In practice, I've had kind of mixed results where even though we've got, and I've worked with talented teams, you do kind of get this gridlock, right? Because there can be 1,000 different ways to do something. And what I found is, as the manager, sometimes you have to just step in and say, like, look, we might not be able to all get to consensus here. And I think Jeff Bezos talks a little bit about this. And that's fine. Like we've kind of said our piece. Here's what we're doing, and like move on. And I don't know, like how do you reconcile those two, right? Because on the one hand, you're trying to have like a meritocracy. On the other hand, though, you're like, we got to get stuff done, So what's your thoughts on that?
Well, I could take it back to kind of, one of the things I talk about, just running your life in general, right? Which is that, I always tell people that I don't take feedback, right? And, and some people get upset by that. But this is what I mean by that is that I hear the feedback, like I hear when people are, but I ultimately make my own decision, and it's irregardless of what other people think I should do and what they've advised, right? So I'm hearing all the information, but then I'm processing it and then deciding what I'm going to do, right? Instead, and I think that's that's an important thing. And most people don't do that. Most people, what they do is they listen to other people's opinions and feedback, and then they respond to the feedback, whatever feedback they think is most accurate or most troublesome to them, they respond to, and so they're actually outsourcing their decision-making ability to someone else and to the world, right? You could say it's caring what other people think. It's not allowing your own internal compass to guide you, right? And so I'd say the same thing in business and in management is it's good to have a team that comes up with ideas, then someone working for you, and to give them enough rope and give them as much leeway as possible to make decisions on their own and whatnot, and to let the best ideas bubble up to the top and to rely on that. But ultimately, I think it's also important that, right, whatever level of management that you're at, that you are the ultimate decision maker. That's why that's what a position of authority in my mind means. That's the only thing that it really means. Like if you have authority over something, but you have to be responsible as well, right? So, like for instance, with my workers and my team, they basically have autonomy. I want them to do their work on their own. They don't need to really get approval from me on, like, they can make their own mistakes, and they should work autonomously without me having to tell them what to do or make every single decision. But ultimately, I will step in where I need to, and ultimately, if I need to say something, like I have authority in the situation, and I will always take into account what people say. But ultimately, you have to make that decision if you're in that position of authority. But at the same time, I take 100% responsibility for every single thing that any person on my team does and the decisions that I make. So I think that's sort of the balance there, is that you want to get the ideas, you want to hear people, you want to get the best ideas to come out and forward. But at the same time, whether it's you who's the decision maker, you can come out and say, look, okay, here's what, I've heard everything, and this is what we're doing, right?
Yeah.
And this is, why we're doing this, and you don't have to agree, but I do need you to be on board. So,
Yeah.
And if you're not on board, you're off the team, because anyone who's not on board will be sabotaging the effort, right? And so it's a good way to weed people out as well. And then, if you're not the decision maker, if you have a different level of authority, then is there a team lead? Is there someone that you're appointing into that authority? And then you need to tell them, look, at the end of the day, you're the one who needs to make the decision. You take in account everything that's going on and what people have said and their ideas, but ultimately you are responsible. So you have the authority, you make the decision. And I think that's real critical. I'm a big believer of chain of command, and to make sure that we have those pieces in, because a lot of times the meritocracy is not the ideal. situation, right? Because more often than not, the decisions that we're making, like especially when you have a lot of intelligent people, they're almost like there's multiple paths that are just about as good, right? There's maybe like something that's like 80% effective and one that's 85% and 9. It doesn't matter. Like wasting time is more of an issue, and the debates and arguments, it's better to pick the 80% decision over the 90% effective one, and move forward rather than waste time, debate, and stuff like that. At least that's how I see it. So
I mean, that makes a lot of sense to me. And that's been kind of my experience as well. It's funny, like, you kind of have on the one hand, you've got this sort of agile, call it like euphoria, right? Where it's like, oh, you'd have like these like if everything works perfectly, these self-organizing teams and a total meritocracy, and the team figures everything out, and there are no real like leaders, or managers, I should say, maybe not leaders, but managers. But in practice, I've seen exactly what you're describing. Like that doesn't stand on its own. Like you need an ultimate decision maker. You need somebody that you can, that's going to take the accountability and the ownership and really going to drive that thing home and move it along and make sure you don't get stuck in analysis paralysis and stuff like that. So yeah, that definitely makes a lot of sense.
And business is war. I mean, imagine if you had an army where they're all just like sitting together and deciding what to do. Like it would not be very effective at all, right? Business is ruthless, it's cutthroat, it's war. And, I think there's a little bit of an entitlement today where people think that their opinion should count and they should be respected for their skills and experience. And I understand that point, but I vehemently disagree with it, because who's paying your paycheck? The person who's paying you for the service is the one who ultimately decides what you're going to do. That's the deal when you hire. If you're an entrepreneur, if you work for yourself, if you're running your own business, you get to call the shots. If you're not, then you're not the authority. You're not the one in charge. You're not the one who's signing the paychecks. And so I think that's important to understand. And within that environment, as an employee, you can operate in that environment with a fair degree of safety. Like if you're in that environment and the person who is calling the shots, who has the authority, is also doing their job in taking responsibility, then you've got a big safety net there. Like you're free from the responsibility. Like you can like take risks, you can do things that make sense to you. You don't have to worry about all of that, because they're taking on that. And that's what true leadership, I believe, is the person who's in authority taking responsibility as well. So that's, I see it as a value, but definitely there's a huge amount of entitlement today, I think, with a lot of the workforce. And, I don't tolerate it one bit. If I'll just fire someone immediately if they feel like they're entitled in some way, right? That, ultimately, if I'm paying someone, I want them to do the job that I want them to do, right? I'll listen to their opinion. I'll listen to, their advice. I'm obviously hiring them because I feel like they've got skills and good advice that I want. But ultimately, when it comes down to it, right, it's an at-will arrangement, right? Like you're the one who's signing up to do this job to exchange the money for the work. So
yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Definitely. It's funny when you were saying that, I was just thinking back at that, the review you did of that Joel Spolsky article. Do you remember that? Where he talked about, he had, I think it was some kind of insane non-compete where he was like, listen, anything you develop, I own it, basically. Right. Even if it's in your off hours on your own computer, it has nothing to do with the business of what we do here. It's mine. I was like, what in the world? Like, are we your slaves or are we your employees? Like, what is going on here? Anyways, I know we said about a half hour. I want to be respectful of your time, John. I've got a couple more things, but I do understand if we're at time, you tell me where we're at.
Well, yeah, we should probably wrap this up here. I've got a couple appointments, but But yeah, maybe just finish up with kind of like maybe one, if you've got one strong point about maybe some advice that you have for everyone watching this, and yeah.
Okay. All right. Cool. I think the biggest thing for me about when I think about the Bulldog mindset and what it is, John, you're doing, and the takeaway for me is just gain wisdom. And honestly, John, I feel like you have a lot of wisdom. You have a lot of life experience, and you know a lot of people like Dan Locke, like Manny, like others who have a lot of wisdom. You have them on your channel. And the thing is, life is short. You're not going to have time to make all the mistakes yourself. You're not going to have time to learn everything firsthand yourself. So be reading, be watching these YouTube videos, be talking with other people, talking about things that matter, and don't be afraid to disagree with people too. That's how you work out and sort through some of these things. And like I said, John, I mean, I really feel like, you're out here, you don't have to be doing this. You certainly didn't have to have me on the show. And I really appreciate it, man. I mean, honestly, I really feel like, and even from before, you're doing this because you want to do this, because you're a teacher at heart, and because you want to help people. And I think that's a awesome and inspiring thing, just kind of on its own. So I really appreciate that, man.
Yeah. Okay. And real quick, the site, so everyone can kind of check out, because I think it's a really cool idea. Where should they go to find out about your new startup here?
Okay, cool. So that is eventsathome.co. I always want to put the M on the end. It's not .com, it's .co. We had a meeting about that once, but yeah, eventsathome.co is the startup. And yeah, we're hoping to leverage the gig economy to kind of reinvent how we do events. So
awesome. Cool. Well, guys, check it out. And yeah, it looks really cool. I wish you the best success on that. And thanks for coming on the channel and sharing, Brandon. And I look forward to hearing your progress.
All right. Awesome, John. It's been great. Thanks a lot, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Take care.
All right. Bye.